Remember the announcement of the consolidation of commercial banks in Nigeria in July 2004? Well, that's where that story began from. And of course, from 2006 on, so many things have happened until this moment. And someone who said in that report that you saw in the welcoming slide as well, you saw his name, Magnus Maduka. He is here with us this morning to shed some light. He's chairman, Association of Ex-Staff of Non-Consolidated Banks of Nigeria, as well as former Deputy General Manager, Operations, Hallmark Bank. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
It's been a long walk to freedom, hasn't it?
You are very right.
Should we even say it's freedom or justice?
Justice, more like it.
Okay. Long walk to justice. First of all, what was the trip? Or what has the trip been? It's been so many years.
Well, it's been very, very terrible experience. Our membership have lost over 100 relations and staff because of the hardship the policy threw them into. We're just sent out of our jobs without any consideration whatsoever to what happens to us thereafter. And we made all manner of attempts at diplomatic resolution of the problem. But it kept failing until we decided to bite the bullet and head for court and test that policy in the law court.
But it took about 2 years between 2004 when the announcement was made and 2006 when the whole exercise, finally rounded off with the banks solidly consolidated, as it would seem. What kinds of conversation happened at that time? What kind of responses did you get from the CBN and from the NDIC that's just received a court order now?
Well, all we were hearing was that if banks do not or did not consolidate, they will lose their license. As far as we are concerned, staff, it's not within our purview to handle that. It was for our employers to come up with the required share capital of 25 billion so they can continue in business. So suddenly by 2006, the licenses were withdrawn and the staff were sent away empty-handed. Between the 2004 and 2006 you mentioned, there was a promise, a firm promise from the then governor of Central Bank, Professor Chukwuma Soludo, that those banks that could not make the consolidation will have their staff sorted out according to the subsisting terms of their employment between them and their employers.
So by the CBN or by your employers?
By the central bank, they will be sorted out because the banks were opening their shops.
By the central bank or by your employers?
By the central bank. The employers would have lost their licenses.
So what were the terms of reference of your employment and the claimants in this suit? For instance, how long had they worked and all of that? Give us a sense of those details.
Some of them have served in that industry and in their particular banks for over 20 years. I worked in the banking industry for about 20 years, 11 of which was in Hallmark Bank, PLC, defunct Hallmark Bank, PLC. Some people have been there much earlier than I, and so on and so forth. So you don't have a particular year that was set apart for you to be entitled. Insofar as when you come into the bank, you are working with a view to some terminal benefits when you are exiting the system. And all these were just thrown to the winds.
Which were contained in your letters of appointment, I reckon.
Terms and conditions of services. We had employee handbooks, which stated all this, that if you are leaving after 10 years, you'll be entitled to XYZ. If you are leaving after 5 years, you'll be entitled to XYZ, and so on and so forth. So they were articulated.
So after the licenses of these banks were withdrawn, what was the directive of the CBN about how to then manage terminal benefits and all of that?
The central bank handed over the liquidation of those banks to the NDIC. And NDIC was the undertaker, as it were, that closed the banks and handed them over to new buyers. The buyers came, bought the assets of the bank, and were walking away from the liabilities of the bank. The whole balance sheet was before the buyers, but they concentrated on the assets of the bank and totally ignored the liabilities of the banks, which included the terminal benefits of the staff.
Was this fact lost on the CBN and the undertaker NDIC that you talked about?
Quite frankly, I wouldn't know. Because what I do know is that there was a callous indifference to the welfare of the staff.
So would it have been out of place if the undertakers of the bank had taken not just the assets, but the liabilities as well?
It would have been perfectly okay if they took both assets and liabilities, because the governor promised, that is Soludo, promised that they were going to do, purchase and assumption. That's a particular type of winding up a bank. And if they do it, the staff that are concerned, the staff that will be affected by that policy, will be sorted out as appropriate.
Did they sort out any of the banks that also face the same scenario with you in history in the country?
Well, for what we know is that one or two of those banks, like Leeds Bank, City Express Bank, they had their terminal benefits credited into their accounts with the bank.
By who?
Well, by the bank owners and their staff.
At the time, not the buyers.
Not the buyers.
And not the CBN or NDIC?
Not the CBN, not the buyer. When this struggle began, City Express did not join us because they had been paid. When NDIC came and took over the banks, NDIC just assumed the depositors were all depositors and paid City Express and the other bank too. So they are not part of this struggle.
So wait, City Express Bank, you said they were paid by those who acquired the bank, or was it CBN or NDIC who paid
when
them?
the depositors were being paid, their staff got paid.
By who? Who paid them?
I'm telling you, their staff got paid.
By who?
Could be by the new buyers, could be by Central Bank. I don't have that information. But their staff got paid. They are not on this struggle.
So how many ex-bank staff are involved in this struggle, as you call it?
You're talking head count, you mean?
No. Banks.
Banks.
Not the number.
I think it started with about 14 banks or so. It's now shrouded it's shrouded in history. I can't tell exactly, but it was about 14 banks that couldn't make the consolidation ab initio.
Speaking of which, earlier reports from 2013 quote 14,000 claimants to the suit. But after the judgment, we hear that there are 1,114 claimants.
116.
So tell us what happened, 116. Tell us what happened along the way.
Okay. We discovered, because this has taught us a lot of lessons, we discovered that we were not a union. So we could not approach the court as union. And then we now said we should employ or hire the services of a lawyer together, and individuals, we give a letter of consent to the lawyers to represent us. That helped us to scale down on cost of litigation, because we had come together individually to use the services of the chambers. And that's what led to where we are now. We couldn't approach the court as a union, because we are not unionized.
Okay. So how did 14,000 become 1,160?
Okay. When you pass through the experience we just passed through, we were like a ragtag army. Our people were scattered all over the world, looking for how to survive. One or two colleagues even had to join the army in some foreign country. So everybody was just running for their life, for survival. So just a few of us that were still around were the people you saw on that judgment. Several, now that the victory is here, several letters of consent are flooding. In fact, we're having problems sleeping well, collating those documents. So this might have to be done in batches, but if Central Bank and NDIC want to save themselves unnecessary problem, because they have enough problem on their hands, the value of the Naira crashing by the day is there. It's weightier matter than the stipends comparatively that they are to give to hapless staff that had nothing to do with the consolidation exercise. So if they want to save themselves problems, they should just grant every staff of those banks, including those who joined last week before the shutdown of the banks. Why? Because when they joined, they had their terminal benefit in view, which would have ordinarily run its course, but for the intervention of Central Bank to the career of those people. So we want to appeal that everybody be treated together. Otherwise, it will be done in batches. So new letters of credit are streaming in, even as I'm speaking to you now.
Besides the 1,116?
Oh, yes.
Speaking of which, what are you now hearing, particularly since the judgment came from the CBN and the NDIC, about the execution of this judgment, about compliance with the judgment?
The judge said he gave them 3 months to pay up, failing which they will begin to, the delay will begin to attract 10% interest on the sum. I hope that answers your question.
As the CBN and the NDIC, have they contacted your association of ex-bank staff about implementation?
Well, in fairness, this happened just on the 23rd of May, and they have not. So it's still quite recent.
Is that to say, because there have been denials for quite a while, and now the judgment is out, I would assume that by now you would know whether or not the CBN and the NDIC are aware of this judgment.
Oh, I'm very sure they are aware, because their lawyers were in the court.
Okay. Now, I also want to assume that, this 5.7 billion naira is going to how many people now? Let me just make it a question. Is it the 1,116 or in addition to these other people who are sending in letters of credit?
I think it's in addition to the others that are coming up with letters of credit. The details are still not very clear to me, too, even as the leader of the association.
Okay. Even though
are you going to put a cut-off time for the letters of credit?
Oh yeah, look, you see.
Even though they're not joined in the suit over the years,
the cut-off time is just a luxury. Why? Because they are now self-motivated. We have gathered enough momentum, and everybody wants to join in. We gave them 1 month anyway.
Okay.
Because we can't be on this forever.
Okay. So the question now is, speculatively now, you don't have the facts, just as you said. So speculatively now, is there a likelihood that this, project that you're on now is targeting almost 14,000 ex-bank staff that started with you, or just 1,100?
No, it's certainly much more than 1,116.
Okay.
In fact, I'll be surprised if this number represents up to 25% of the staff force of the banks concerned.
Really?
So it's certain that it's just a cross section.
Okay. So now we have this judgment. One victory, one it would seem. And I'm not even sure it is safe to say it's halfway through. Because from what you're talking about now, executing this judgment is another Herculean task on its own, both on your part and on the part of the executors. So what are the challenges that you see ahead of you? You've mentioned one of them, which is this letters of credit flooding in. What are some of these challenges that you have to contend with, and what's the plan?
The sheer crowd that this is unleashing on us, those of us managing this program, is a lot of challenge for us. A lot of people are coming up with letters of consent, which we are collating. They are getting their employment letters. Anything that will prove and confirm to us that they were staff of the banks they represent. So those are the challenges we have.
That's one. Another thing now that may question that may be asked now is everyone going to be paid based on the the terminal benefits that they had in mind when they came in, just as you said earlier, or is there some consideration, discounting, accounting that's going to go into it?
Okay, the one that is easy to conclude on now is that people will be paid or should be paid according to the terms and conditions of their services with their respective employers. All the banks do not have the same conditions of service. They could be similar, but they are not exactly the same. But people will be paid as per the agreement they had with their employers. That's what's going to play out.
And I imagine the appreciation of the currency would definitely affect what should, go to a staff, duly. How is that being sorted out?
You're not requesting to be paid in dollars, are you?
Compared to
the worth of,
but then she has a point.
Yes.
Because the value of the naira now and then.
Will CBN afford it?
No, we are not. Look, there's a judgment.
Oh, okay.
And the judge, we actually asked for 100% interest. But the judge crashed it to a sum total of 10 million to be split to all the claimants. So that's the situation. Okay. We've lost a lot of value. To answer your question directly, we've lost a lot of value.
Okay.
But we would rather get paid than just sent home
empty-handed. Speak to this before you go. The callous indifference that you talked about is still happening in the case of mergers and acquisitions, where the buyers do not take responsibility for the liabilities of staff that are sent out. They're sent out without anything. And I know someone who lost her job after working for nearly 20 years in the bank that was acquired. What are your thoughts on this, and how can this be addressed?
I think we should be our brother's keeper in this country. There's too much hard-heartedness in this land. It's only in this country that a government can send away thousands of people just because you want to consolidate the banks. And you brought all the banks to the same pedestal of 25 billion overnight. It's not done anywhere. No country with a responsible government, and it's not this present government. It happened back then. No country with a responsible government will tell people to lose their jobs without taking thoughts for what will happen to them. Let's just love ourselves. There's too much self-centeredness in this country. We had a running battle at NDIC, but thank God it's over now. There's no winner, there's no vanquished. And we just want them to cooperate with us and let people live their lives, whatever is left of those lives.
Well, you spoke to one leg of my question. Okay, because it's like she shared my notes, the mental notes that I made. But what are the lessons that you would say we have learned, both as a nation and as an industry, from this experience? Talk about 14 to 16 years or thereabout now.
All right.
What lessons do you think we should have learned by now to forestall this, both for the industry, the banking industry, and the people who work in those industries?
Well, one that readily comes to mind is that people should think holistically when you are planning a program. That program was hastily done and shoddily implemented. The whole thing was shoddy. It wasn't thought through by the leadership of Central Bank at that point in time. So we should think properly when we are going out on such a project in this country. Why? Because lives are affected. Lives are affected. Homes are ruined. Marriages collapsed. Just because banks want to become 25 billion share capital ownership.
And any lesson for staff of banks today?
Well, you don't consume all you have.
Thank you. That's,
Magnus
That's
Baduka,
apt.
Chairman, Association of Ex-Staff of Non-Consolidated Banks of Nigeria and former Deputy General Manager Operations, Hallmark Bank. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts this morning.
Thanks for your
Truly
time.
appreciate
God
it.
bless you all.
Okay.
Thank you.